Welcome to our channel, your gateway to the most spine-chilling tales and unnerving true stories. Today, we present a true story, a fairy tale gone awry. Get ready to be on the edge of your seat as we delve into this unsettling narrative. But be warned, comfort is the last thing you'll find here. The small village of Oakwood, nestled amidst the rolling hills and lush greenery of rural England, was abuzz with excitement. It was a day like no other, for it was the day that Ollie and Eliza, the village's most beloved couple, were to exchange their wedding vows. The sun shone brightly in the cerulean sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the picturesque landscape. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers and the sounds of laughter and joyous music. The bride, Eliza, was a vision of radiant beauty. Her long, raven-black hair cascaded down her back in gentle waves, accentuating her porcelain white skin and vibrant red lips. She wore an exquisite ivory gown, delicately embroidered with intricate floral designs, which flowed gracefully down to the ground. A simple yet elegant bouquet of white roses and baby's breath complemented her attire perfectly. The groom, Ollie, was every bit as handsome as she was. His dark, chocolate brown hair was styled neatly, framing his tan face. He wore a tailored black suit, accentuating his broad shoulders and muscular frame. A small, simple boutonniere adorned his lapel. Their love for each other was palpable, as their eyes locked and they beamed with happiness. The ceremony took place at the quaint village church, its ancient stone walls and stained glass windows offering a serene and sacred backdrop for the occasion. The minister, an elderly and wise man who had known the couple since they were children, officiated the ceremony. As Ollie and Eliza exchanged their vows, they felt nothing but love and contentment wash over them. Their voices trembled with emotion as they professed their undying love for one another, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin. The reception, held at the village hall, was a celebration unlike any other. The hall was beautifully decorated with streamers and balloons in shades of red and white, and tables adorned with an abundance of delicious food and drink. The dance floor was packed as guests of all ages swayed to the rhythm of the lively music, their faces aglow with joy and happiness. Ollie and Eliza took to the dance floor, sharing their first dance as husband and wife. They moved in perfect unison, their bodies swaying gently to the music, their eyes never leaving each other. It was a moment of pure bliss, a testament to their love and commitment to one another. But even as they danced, a dark cloud began to form on the horizon. Unbeknownst to them, their phones had been stolen by an uninvited guest, setting off a chain of events that would test the strength of their bond like never before. As the night wore on, Ollie and Eliza would find themselves confronted with a series of challenges and obstacles, each more daunting than the last. Would their love be strong enough to weather the storm? Only time would tell. The reception hall was abuzz with activity as the newlyweds, Ollie and Eliza, tried to enjoy their special day. The soft glow of the string lights and the gentle strumming of the live band created an intimate atmosphere that seemed to envelop the couple in a warm embrace. Despite the initial shock of having their phones stolen, they managed to push the thought aside, determined not to let the incident ruin their perfect day. As the night progressed, however, the tension began to build. Ollie found himself constantly glancing around the room, looking for any sign of suspicious behavior. He could feel Eliza's hand tightening in his, as if she sensed his unease. The dance floor was filled with their closest friends and family, all laughing and enjoying themselves, but Ollie couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. Meanwhile, Eliza's parents were doing their best to maintain order, making sure that everything ran smoothly. They too were worried about the stolen phones, but they didn't want to upset their daughter any further. They kept telling themselves that the police would find the thief soon enough and everything would be back to normal. Just as they were about to cut the cake, Eliza's phone rang. The ringtone was an old song they used to listen to when they first started dating. Ollie's heart skipped a beat as he saw the caller ID. It was an unfamiliar number, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was the thief. He excused himself from the cake-cutting ceremony and stepped outside to take the call. "Hello," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a moment of silence before a distorted voice came over the line. Is this Ollie?" the voice asked. Ollie felt a chill run down his spine. "Who is this?" he demanded. "I'm sorry," the voice stammered. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just needed the money. Please, don't call the police. I'll return the phones tomorrow." Ollie hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He glanced back inside the hall, where he could see Eliza watching him worriedly. He knew that she would want him to call the police, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for the person on the other end of the line. "Okay," he finally replied. "Just bring the phones back tomorrow, to the same place we were sitting when they were stolen. No funny business, understand?" The voice on the other end of the line nodded, even though Ollie couldn't see them. "Good. Now, go. And don't hurt my wife." The line went dead. Ollie stepped back inside the hall, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. He took Alyssa's hand and led her outside, away from the prying ears of their guests. "It was the thief," he explained. "They called to apologize and said they'd return the phones tomorrow." Alyssa's face registered a mix of emotions: surprise, confusion, and maybe even a hint of sympathy. "You believe them?" she asked doubtfully. Ollie shrugged. "I don't know. It just felt like they were sincere." He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Look, we can't do anything about it tonight. Let's just enjoy the rest of our wedding and deal with this tomorrow, okay?" Alyssa nodded, taking a deep breath. She knew that Ollie was right. There was nothing they could do now. They'd just have to hope that the thief would keep their word. As they rejoined their guests, Ollie and Eliza tried to forget their worries and focus on the love and support that surrounded them. The band began playing a slow dance, and the couple took each other in their arms, lost in the moment. Despite the uncertainty of the situation, they couldn't help but feel grateful for the life they'd built together, and for the love that had brought them here. As they danced beneath the twinkling lights, they knew that whatever tomorrow might bring, they would face it together. The morning after their wedding, Ollie and Eliza woke up in their new home, the bed still warm from their bodies. They lay there, the weight of the events from the night before pressing heavily on their chests. Despite their efforts to remain optimistic, they both knew that something was not right. As they took turns in the bathroom, each trying to compose themselves, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When they finally mustered the courage to face the day, they found their parents in the kitchen, busily preparing breakfast. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm croissants filled the air, but the tension was palpable. Their parents exchanged worried glances as they saw the couple enter the room. "How are you two feeling this morning?" Ollie's father asked tentatively. Ollie shrugged. "I guess we're still in shock. It's hard to believe that someone would do something like that. We're doing everything we can to find out who it was," Alyssa's mother assured them, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The police are investigating, and we've put up posters around the village." They sat down at the table and tried to eat, but the food stuck in their throats. The conversation was stilted, filled with awkward pauses and unspoken words. Ollie and Eliza couldn't help but feel as if their perfect wedding day had been ripped away from them, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Later that morning, they drove to the police station to report the theft of their phones. The ride there was silent, with both of them lost in their thoughts. The station was bustling with activity, but when they finally met with the officers, they felt a sense of relief wash over them. The police took down their statements and assured them that they would do everything in their power to find the thief and recover their phones. As they left the station, Ollie and Eliza felt a newfound determination rising within them. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they would face it together. They decided to spend the rest of the day reconnecting, doing things they loved. They would start by going for a long walk in the park, hand in hand, taking in the beauty of the village they had called home for so long. The sun shone down on them as they strolled along the winding paths, the birds singing overhead. Ollie reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather journal. "I've been meaning to give this to you," he said, handing it to Eliza. "I thought you could use it to write down your thoughts and feelings about everything that's been happening." Elissa smiled, feeling touched. "Thank you," she said, running her fingers along the spine of the journal. "I will." They continued walking, lost in their own thoughts, but somehow feeling closer than ever before. They knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but they also knew that they would face it together. And in that knowledge, they found a strength they hadn't known they possessed. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm, golden light through the windows, Ollie and Eliza awoke with a start. The events of the previous night still weighed heavily on their minds, and the air in their bedroom felt thick with tension. Ollie glanced over at his father, who was fast asleep in the armchair by the window, his chest rising and falling slowly with each breath. He knew that his father had spent the night keeping watch, but the relief he felt was short-lived as he remembered the unsettling occurrences that had disturbed their rest. They had tried to convince themselves that it had all been a nightmare, but the lingering sense of dread and unease only grew stronger as the morning progressed. The memory, the tapping on the window, the strange noises outside, and the ominous voice on the phone felt all too real. They knew they couldn't stay here anymore. The thought of going back to their home, now tainted by fear and danger, was unbearable. They decided to call the police station once more, hoping against hope that something might have changed. After what seemed like an eternity on hold, they finally spoke to an officer who sounded both sympathetic and frustrated. There were no new developments in their case, but the officer assured them that they were doing everything they could to find the person responsible. Ollie and Eliza hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of relief and despair. Their parents exchanged worried glances as they discussed the situation. Ollie's father suggested that they consider moving out of the house for a while, at least until the police could sort things out. Eliza's parents nodded in agreement, though it was clear that they were just as concerned for their daughter's safety as Ollie's parents were for his. Eventually, it was decided that Ollie and Eliza would stay with Eliza's parents for the time being. The thought of leaving their home was painful, but they knew it was the only way to feel safe again. As they packed their belongings into suitcases, their hands trembling with a mix of fear and determination, they couldn't help but wonder when, or if, they would ever be able to return to the life they once knew. The drive to Eliza's parents' house seemed to take forever, the weight of their shared anxiety pressing down on them like a physical presence. As they pulled up to the familiar driveway, they breathed a sigh of relief, grateful to be out of their old neighborhood. Eliza's parents ushered them inside, offering words of comfort and assurance that they would do everything in their power to make sure they felt safe and secure. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty and unease. Ollie and Eliza tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, going to work and school as if nothing had happened, but the shadows of their past constantly lurked in the corners of their minds. They took turns checking the locks on the doors and windows, their eyes darting nervously around every room they entered. The police continued to investigate their case, but there were no major breakthroughs. The thief responsible for stealing their phones and making those strange, disturbing phone calls remained at large. As the weeks turned into months, the sense of foreboding only grew stronger. They couldn't help but wonder if the person behind it all was just biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As the sun rose over the quaint village, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Ollie and Eliza, now living with Ollie's grandmother, tried to go about their daily routines, but their minds were elsewhere. They were both haunted by the events of the past few days and couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The once vibrant and loving couple now found themselves growing increasingly distant, unable to trust each other completely. The morning routine was tense. Ollie, still dressed in his suit from the wedding, moved stiffly through the motions of making breakfast. Eliza, clad in a simple t-shirt and pajama pants, sat at the kitchen table, lost in thought. The familiar sounds of their grandmother's house were now foreign and unsettling. Ollie's grandmother, sensing the tension, tried to lighten the mood by offering them some of her homemade bread, but neither Ollie nor Eliza had much of an appetite. As they sat down to eat, they couldn't help but glance around, feeling constantly on edge. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow that danced across the wall, sent a shiver down their spines. Ollie's grandmother, sensing their discomfort, assured them that she would keep a close eye on them, but the words fell flat. Ollie and Eliza knew that they were the ones who needed to face their fears and find a way to rebuild their trust. Throughout the day, they tried to distract themselves with various tasks. Ollie worked on his laptop, researching ways to track down the stolen phones, while Eliza tried to occupy herself with reading and light cleaning. They would occasionally exchange glances, their eyes filled with unspoken words, but they remained silent. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected between them, and they were both too afraid to break it down. That evening, as they sat together on the couch, Ollie finally broached the subject that had been weighing heavily on his mind. "Eliza," he began hesitantly, "I can't help but feel like this is all because of your past with Rob. You never told me much about him, and now I'm wondering if there's something I should know." Eliza looked away, her face flushing with shame and guilt. She knew that Ollie was right, but she couldn't bring herself to reveal the truth. "There's nothing you need to know," she said, her voice shaking. "He's just a guy I used to date a long time ago. He was obsessed with me. He wouldn't take no for an answer, and when I broke things off, he became angry. That's why he did this." Ollie reached out to take her hand, but she pulled away, unable to meet his gaze. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Ollie couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. He knew that they needed to confront their demons, but he wasn't sure how. He reached over to turn off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. In the shadows, he could see Elisa's silhouette, her features softened by the moonlight filtering through the curtains. He wished he could go back to that day, to before the wedding, when they were innocent and happy. But he knew that they couldn't change the past. All they could do was face the future together, and hope that they could find their way back to each other. As he drifted off to sleep, Ollie's mind wandered back to the wedding day, to the moment when they exchanged vows. He remembered the feeling of pure love and devotion that consumed him, and he knew that he would fight for their relationship, even if it meant facing down the shadows that haunted them both. In the darkness, Eliza lay awake, her heart heavy with guilt and fear. She knew that she needed to tell Ollie the truth, but she was afraid of losing him. She rolled over, pressing her back against his chest, feeling the warmth of his body as he wrapped his arms around her. In that moment, she felt a spark of hope, a tiny flame that flickered in the darkness, reminding her that even in the face of their fears, they could find their way back to each other. As dawn broke over the village, Ollie and Eliza fell into a fitful sleep, their dreams tangled together like the threads of a frayed blanket. They did not know what the future held, but they clung to the belief that together, they could face whatever came their way. For now, they would rest, and in the morning, they would face the world anew. Arm in arm, their love a beacon of hope in the darkness. It had been several weeks since Ollie and Eliza had moved in with Ollie's grandmother. The initial shock of their wedding day ordeal had begun to wear off, but the memories still haunted them. They were trying their best to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Ollie found himself constantly on edge, his suspicion towards Eliza growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as he was rummaging through their old bedroom, Ollie stumbled upon a hidden box tucked away in the corner. The box was small and unassuming, but something about it caught his eye. Curiosity getting the better of him, he carefully opened it. Inside were a stack of old letters and photographs, all addressed to Eliza. The writing on the envelopes was familiar, but it took Ollie a moment to place it. It was Rob's handwriting. His heart began to race as he leafed through the letters. They were all addressed to Eliza, filled with declarations of love and obsessive infatuation. It was clear that Rob had been pining for her for years, and Ollie couldn't help but feel a wave of anger and betrayal wash over him. He felt like an idiot for not having put the pieces together sooner. With trembling hands, he showed the letters to Eliza, who had been in the kitchen preparing dinner. Her expression turned pale as she took in the contents of the box. For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes darting back and forth between Ollie and the letters. Finally, she mustered up the courage to speak. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I swear, I had no idea he felt this way." Ollie wasn't convinced. "And why did you keep these letters, then?" he demanded. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" Elisa looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "Because I didn't want to hurt you," she said softly. "I thought if I ignored him, he'd eventually get the message." Ollie felt a bitter laugh escape his lips. "And what message was that, Eliza? That I wasn't good enough for you?" She winced at his words. "No, that's not what I meant. I just didn't want to bring any more trouble into our lives. I thought if I ignored him, he'd leave us alone." "Well, it didn't work, did it?" Ollie retorted. "He stole our phones and made us move out of our home. He made us feel like we were in danger. And all because of you and your damn letters." Elisa's eyes welled up with tears. "I'm sorry, Ollie. I didn't know how to handle it. I just wanted everything to be normal again." Normal. The word echoed in Ollie's mind as he glared at Eliza. How could anything ever be normal again? They had been through so much, and now he wasn't even sure if he could trust her. He felt like a fool for not seeing the signs, for not realizing that Eliza had been hiding something from him. He turned away from her, struggling to control his emotions. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he muttered. "I don't know who I can trust." Elisa followed him, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. "Ollie, please. I love you. I only wanted to protect you. I never wanted any of this to happen." But Ollie was beyond hearing her. He couldn't help but feel that everything had been a lie. A web of deceit spun by Eliza and Rob, with him as the unwitting victim. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to the story, that they were both hiding something else from him. As the afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Ollie sat down on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know who to trust. And he certainly didn't know if he could ever forgive Eliza. "I need some time alone," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "I need to figure things out." Elisa nodded, her expression a mix of sadness and understanding. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll give you some space. Just promise me that you'll come back to me, okay? Because I love you, Ollie. No matter what." Her words only served to deepen Ollie's sense of unease. He wasn't sure if he could ever trust her again, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to. But as he watched her walk away, her back bent with the weight of their shared burden, he couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than he was willing to admit. Only time would tell. It had been a few weeks since the nightmare began, and Ollie and Elisa's lives were still in shambles. They had moved in with Ollie's grandmother, trying to put the past behind them. But the lingering feeling of being watched, the constant paranoia, made it impossible to truly forget what had happened. Ollie had confronted Eliza about her past relationship with Rob, but she insisted she had no idea how deeply obsessed he had become. Ollie wasn't so sure anymore. One day, while rummaging through their old bedroom at his grandmother's house, Ollie stumbled upon a hidden box. Inside were old letters and photographs, all addressed to Eliza, from Rob. Ollie's heart sank as he read through them, the depth of Rob's obsession becoming painfully clear. He found himself unable to confront Eliza with the evidence, afraid of what it might do to their relationship. But the more he tried to ignore the box and its contents, the more it weighed on his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He decided to take matters into his own hands and track down Rob himself. Ollie spent hours searching online, trying to find any information about Rob. Eventually, he found a social media profile that matched the description Eliza had given him. Nervously, he messaged Rob, asking him to meet in a public place. Rob responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet at a local coffee shop the next day. The next morning, Ollie arrived at the coffee shop early, his heart racing in his chest. He waited nervously as Rob walked in, looking just as he had remembered him from their old school days. There was no avoiding the confrontation any longer. Ollie took a deep breath and approached Rob. "Rob, I need you to listen to me. You need to leave us alone," Ollie said, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "You've done enough damage already. You can't keep doing this to us." Rob looked surprised for a moment, before his expression turned defensive. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," he insisted. "I just wanted Eliza to understand how I felt. I thought if I could make her see that, she'd come back to me." "But you didn't stop there," Ollie countered. "You went too far. You stole our phones, broke into our house. You put our lives in danger." Rob winced at the accusation, but didn't deny it. "I was desperate," he said quietly. "I didn't know what else to do." Ollie felt a flash of sympathy for Rob, but he pushed it aside. He couldn't let Rob's feelings justify his actions. "Look, I get it," Ollie said, trying to sound understanding. "But you need to understand that Eliza doesn't feel the same way anymore. It's over, and you have to accept that." Rob looked down at the table, his expression pained. "I know," he said finally. I thought if I could make her remember the good times, she'd see that we belonged together." "But you didn't give her a chance to decide that for herself," Ollie pointed out. "You forced it on her. And that's not fair to either of us." Rob nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I guess I was selfish," he admitted. "I didn't think about how it would affect anyone else." "So," Ollie said, trying to bring the conversation back around, "will you leave us alone? Can you promise me that?" Rob looked up at Ollie, his expression conflicted. "I can try," he said finally. "I'll give you both some space, but if she ever changes her mind, if she wants to talk to me, I want you to know that I'll be there for her." Ollie nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and unease. He knew that Rob's words would likely weigh heavily on Elisa's mind, but he also hoped that she would understand that Rob needed to respect their decision. With one last look at Rob, Ollie turned and walked away, his heart still racing but his mind finally at ease. When Ollie returned to the house, he found Eliza waiting for him in the living room. She looked anxious and unsure, her eyes darting back and forth between him and the door. "Ollie," she said, her voice trembling. "Did you find him?" Ollie sat down next to her, taking her hand in his. "Yes, I found him," he said softly. "He promised to leave us alone. But I want you to know that it's not because of anything you did. It's because we made it clear that we don't want him involved in our lives anymore." Elisa sighed in relief, leaning into Ollie's embrace. "Thank you for doing that," she said quietly. "I was so scared of what he might do next." Ollie held her close, feeling the weight of the past few weeks finally beginning to lift. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first," he said, his voice gentle. "I shouldn't have doubted you." Elisa squeezed his hand. "It's okay," she said, her voice trembling. "I know you were just trying to protect us. I love you for that." She pulled back, looking into his eyes, her own filled with tears. "I love you, Ollie. I want to be with you, no matter what." Ollie smiled, wiping away a tear that had escaped his own eye. "I love you too, Eliza," he said, kissing her forehead. "And I promise, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Together, they sat on the couch, holding each other close, and began to piece their lives back together. The nightmare might not be completely over, but at least now they had each other to face it together. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange. Ollie and Eliza lay entangled in each other's arms, their bodies still flushed from their lovemaking. For the first time in what felt like forever, they felt a sense of peace wash over them. The nightmare was finally over. They had spent the past week holed up at Ollie's grandmother's house, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time the phone rang, their hearts would skip a beat, expecting it to be the police informing them of some new development. But each time, it was only a friend or family member checking in on them. Finally, Ollie had tracked down Rob and confronted him. The man had admitted to everything, stealing their phones, harassing them, and even trying to break into their house. He claimed that he was only trying to win Eliza back, but Ollie didn't buy it. He demanded that Rob leave them alone, and Rob reluctantly agreed. As the days went by, they began to slowly heal. They spoke about what had happened, about their fears and doubts. They talked about the future they had once dreamed of sharing together and how they wanted to make it a reality. They knew that their relationship would never be the same again, but they also knew that it was worth fighting for. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a warm glow over their bed. Ollie propped himself up on one elbow, gazing down at Eliza's peaceful face. He traced his finger along her jawline, feeling the familiar pull in his chest that always made his heart skip a beat. She stirred slightly in her sleep, her features softening into a contented smile. He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I love you, Eliza," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "No matter what happens, I'll always love you." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a look of love and devotion that made his heart swell. "I love you too, Ollie," she whispered, reaching up to caress his cheek. "And I promise, I'll never keep anything from you again. We'll face this together, always." They held each other close, reveling in the feeling of being safe and secure in each other's arms. They knew that their love might not be the fairy tale they once imagined, but it was real and strong enough to survive anything. They would face the challenges ahead of them hand in hand, always. The sun continued to rise, bathing their small corner of the world in its warm, golden light. A new day was dawning, and with it came a sense of hope and possibility. Ollie and Eliza knew that their life together would never be perfect, but they also knew that it was theirs to shape and mold into whatever they wanted it to be. They rolled over, laughing as their entangled limbs tangled even further. The weight of their past struggles felt lighter already, replaced by a newfound sense of determination and resilience. They had survived the worst, and now it was time to build a future together. A future filled with love, trust, and most importantly, honesty. As they lay there, wrapped in each other's embrace, Ollie felt a contentment he had never known before. It was as if the world had been spinning out of control, but now, with Eliza by his side, he felt like he had found his center once more. He knew that their love might not be the fairy tale they once imagined, but it was real and strong enough to survive anything. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, feeling the warmth of her skin against his own. "I love you, Eliza," he whispered. "I love you so much." She smiled up at him, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "I love you too, Ollie," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I promise, we'll get through this together." As they held each other close, the weight of their past faded away, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and possibility. They knew that their love might not be perfect, but it was theirs. And as long as they had each other, they knew they could face anything the world threw at them. Thank you so much for joining me on this cinematic journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Have you experienced a spine-chilling horror that left you trembling? Share your terrifying tale with us by emailing nightmarenetwork@hotmail.com, and we'd be thrilled to feature it on our platform. Until next time, happy movie watching.